you go on this journey of choosing you. It's not about going out there and seeking for someone to choose you. It's about you choosing someone who displays the characteristics of a healthy partner. But at the same time, we have to remember, and this is also something that happens with my clients, is that if you don't do the work, how can you expect a healthy person to want a relationship with you? I mean, like, healthy people also want healthy people as partners. So I have noticed that, some of the people that I have conversations with, and even with my clients, it comes to like, well, they just want to wait for that person to just kind of like show up and be who they need them to be. Right. Like, if they just know what the healthy characteristics are, they're just going to wait for that person to just show up.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work that way. You have to be able to embody the qualities that you really, that are like what are your non-negotiables?
Woo!
And then ask yourself, do I embody any of those?
To reason with someone is to motivate them to do or accept topics, ideas, and issues through discussion and having conversations. This podcast is about the relationship with ourselves and the relationship with others, finding our stability in our self-worth, and how do we actually be in healthy relationships. We find this out through connection, compassion, and communication. Reach out, connect with me, like, subscribe, comment. I want to unpack whatever it is that we can to really get to the nitty and gritty of finding out how do we get better in ourselves and how do we get better in our relationships. Tully Rose is a certified coach specializing in helping those in toxic relationships break out of the cycles of abuse and create the life they want and deserve. While she tackles some serious matters in her work, her presence on social media is animated, comedic, and sprinkled with F-bombs. Not afraid to confront the tough topics or ask the hard questions, Tully is able to help her clients create profound changes in a short amount of time. Her content continues to help many, with one video in particular about trauma bonding now at 2.4 million views on TikTok. The experience she brings to her work also comes from her own real-life traumas of growing up with abuse and becoming a victim of relationship violence. Her mission is to awaken as many people as possible to the shackles of domestic violence and narcissistic abuse so they too may begin the path to freedom.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I'm speaking today with Tully Rose. How are you, Tully? Thanks so much for coming in.
I'm doing great today, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Let's jump straight into it. Why don't you tell everybody who the hell are you and what do you do?
I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering or a codependent and people pleaser in recovery, I would say. And I coach people to help them to heal from narcissistic abuse, from domestic violence, from toxic relationships. I help them to get out of those relationships, or if they're already out, I help them to stay out of those relationships by focusing on their own healing.
Love that. And you have an incredible Instagram, and I love your videos, and I'm glad we've been able to do this. So you definitely preach a very strong message, and I love the way that you're kind of connecting through to your audience. I think it's so good, the messages you share.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a labor of love. It really is. I enjoy interacting with the audience, so that's why I make myself available to answer questions from the audience, because I want to make sure that I'm providing value, that I'm actually addressing what is most important to them, and I'm letting them know that at the same time I'm also accessible, like that I'm not just here sitting on this platform like telling you what to do. You can have conversations with me and I will address your concerns.
Yeah, and I think the part that I really like about it and really aligns with me is like you talk a really authentic message and sort of share your own story and your own wisdom in that as well. And I think that just makes it for me, is being able to kind of really relate and allow people to resonate with what some of the things I guess you've been through and then how you're coming out on the other end of it all.
Yeah, it's really important to me to be authentic and to be as transparent as I possibly can be. I am not a perfect person, and I'm always a work in progress. And so what I promote is that healing is a lifelong commitment, and
Mhm.
I'm ever evolving, and I like to show up in ways that portray that, so that people know that I'm not above them. I'm just walking beside them.
Yeah, that's it. So what's the journey been like? And like how, I guess, long has the bit journey been?
Yeah. Ooh, well, it's been a lifelong one. I grew up in an abusive household, so you know, it doesn't like it's not so surprising that I ended up in an abusive relationship, right? So,
Mm,
growing up in an abusive household, witnessing domestic violence, it really kind
mm,
of prepped me to enter one myself. It didn't matter
yeah,
what my mom told me about having standards and what do better than me, don't do like I do, but it was what I was modeled. So
yeah.
in addition to that, I grew up receiving the message that I was valued when I did things for other people. So I learned
Mm,
that my value came from what I did for other people. So you pair like the experience of domestic violence with kind of growing up in an environment where I was primed to be a people pleaser and codependent, then it was just kind of like a perfect storm to enter into codependent relationships, even with friends.
yeah.
But I think the most painful was, a couple of years ago when I was in a abusive relationship, and I actually went back to that relationship 12 times. And the statistic, I don't know if it's worldwide, it might be just the United States, but the average from what I've heard is 7 times that
Yeah.
someone tries to leave an abusive relationship before they stay gone. Well, mine was 12. I mean, and that's only the times that I can count. Like,
Mhm,
there was
mm,
so much back and forth. And so um I finally got to the point where I had to admit to myself the reality that this person was never going to change, and that I am actually not able to show up as the best version of myself. I didn't like who
mm,
I was becoming. So,
yeah.
um, I got out of it, and I stayed out of it, and I had to heal through that process,
Mm,
and never expected to make a business based on that experience.
yeah.
But here I am.
Yeah. I mean, I followed a similar kind of path. I think that the longing was to figure out why don't I get all I care about is helping others and all I care about is, meeting the needs of others. Why isn't that always fulfilling? What's missing? What's kind of not there for
Mm,
me? And it took me so long to kind of get smacked in the face. My first therapist was like, you're not here for someone else. You need to be here for you. And I was like, you don't know what you're freaking talking about,
yes.
So it took a long time to get, yeah, I mean,
Yep.
how many times it takes you to leave a relationship? I mean, I guess it's the same with ourselves. It's like, how many times does it get us to kind of get out of the fantasy and get into the reality that, like, hey, you're not doing you, you're not looking after you. You don't even know what looking after you or what your needs are
Yes.
looks like. Yeah, so I
Exactly.
relate
Exactly.
heavily
Yeah.
to that. Mm, yeah,
Yes. And
powerful.
the part you said about the reality, right? That's what keeps a lot of us going back to these relationships, and keeps a lot of us not healing even after we've left, because it's not like you leave a toxic situation and you're just like skipping through the meadows, and everything is all wonderful.
Yeah,
It No, that's
every,
actually when your true healing begins.
yeah,
Like it's a different, like it's almost like a different type of hell. If I'm being really honest, when you leave an abusive relationship, it's like it's the hell of having to now face what you were not facing while you were in that relationship. But the best part is that there's actually light at the end of that tunnel. There isn't light at the end of a tunnel of an abusive relationship because it's never going to change. It's not going to get better. If anything, it's going to get worse. So being able to remind ourselves of the reality is very important in my perspective, for being able to heal and to move forward.
I couldn't agree more, but the fantasy is so good. It's so crippling, but it's so intense.
It's like, it is. And it's this is something that I also go over with my clients, is that, if you can have this fantasy where you imagine like this is what this relationship could be like, and you can tap into you keep doing it because it feels good, right? Because you imagine it and it's almost like you can feel it as if it's happening in real time. Just imagine, use that same skill, but imagine you living this wonderful free life without this toxic person who is never going to change. Use that same skill to tap into the emotions that would bring, but it's not as easy as just telling them, it's habit, it's getting into the habit of stopping that fantasy of a relationship that is never going to come to be what it is that you're fantasizing about. It's never going to be that,
Yeah. And that's a tough part of it. I think that's sort of and I really like that actually. And I haven't really thought about it that way. It's like, picture the fantasy that actually you're thriving and you're kind of moved out of the surviving place and you can live in your best way.
Yes, because we're yeah, exactly. Because we are emotional beings, and that's just the way it is. Like, we are, and we're driven to do things because of how we feel inside. And so, so we think a thought, which then causes us to feel an emotion. And then from there, we do something, right? So why not use that to our advantage? And that's another part of what I go over with my clients, starting with like, what are you thinking about? What are the thoughts that keep going through your head? Because something here is not serving you. You are like, when you're thinking about these things, then you feel a certain way and it's driving you to do the same behavior. So if they are fantasizing, like, if only this person would, stop verbally assaulting me, or, just like treat me with respect, if only they would be able to show up when I need them to, then the relationship would be like this. And they fantasize about what it would be like if only they would do these things. Right. So that can feel inside. The emotions that come up, it can feel so visceral and so real that it keeps them in the relationship, or it keeps them going back to the relationship. So my whole thing is, you need to kill the hope. No more hope. Kill hope in these relationships. It's not going to get better, but it's a process, obviously.
Yeah. So it's just really hard to try and cut it at the emotion. It's much easier process to get it in there. Thought, we can change the thinking, we change the outcome.
Yes. But the thing is that with repetition, I've done this with myself, and I've helped my clients create the same result, is that there's that famous Rumi quote that is like something about between stimulus and response, right? So I don't remember what the quote is, but I know it involves stimulus and response. So there is space in between that thing that triggers the thought, right? The impulse, right? So there's space in between the impulse and then the action that's taken after. And so what I tell my clients is that what we're doing is we're not trying to eliminate the impulse. It's not about you never thinking those same thoughts anymore. They can arise, but what we're doing is we're working on what you do next.
Yeah.
You're going to get to the point where you're going to do something different. You're going to make a different decision in between that impulse and the action you take. And so that really helps them to make sense of what we're trying to do together. Because I don't know about you in your practice, but a lot of people that I deal with beat themselves up because they think that they're supposed to eliminate certain thoughts or certain emotions. And that's not what it's about. It's about what you do when those thoughts or emotions come up.
Yeah. You got to create that space, or just make it a little bit wider, right? So that there's more space between to go, I can choose. Yeah. 100%. 100%. And I think a lot of that's not just like these thinkings that come into the head that are kind of surface level. It's kind of like underneath that is our worth, right? It's these messages that are about, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy unless. So that's what I'm going to do. Now that thing is strong, and it's probably going to be there forever. It's just how hijacking is it the whole time. Do you find that, I guess, with a lot of your clients, or that it kind of comes back down to that shame, toxic shame kind of spirals that we get in?
Yes. I love that you brought that up, because shame is something that I speak about with my clients on a regular basis, because not everyone will agree with this, but my opinion on shame versus guilt is that shame is an all-encompassing emotion. It's so heavy. Shame says, I did a bad thing and therefore I am bad. Like as a whole, like the entirety of me is bad because I'm perceiving that I did a bad thing. Right. So I am bad is what shame says. But guilt, on the other hand, can be more productive, meaning that guilt says, I don't feel good about this thing that I did, and I would like to not do it again. So I feel bad about this thing, and I'm now motivated to not do it again. Right. So guilt can be a very productive emotion in my view, and shame is an all-encompassing heavy emotion that does not leave any room for possibility or inspiration or change. So with my clients, I do work with them on identifying, like, what is it that, are you feeling shame right now? And I'm not trying to make them feel more shame for feeling shame, but to be able to know, oh, you know what? I am actually feeling like I'm bad because, like, how did I let myself be in an abusive relationship for however many years? How could I do that? I feel broken. The entirety of me feels broken and bad and unworthy. So being able to identify that shame is what I'm feeling, and then being able to then, question the validity of that. Like, is it really true that I am completely broken? Like, there is no hope for me at all, that I am just bad and unlovable and unworthy. Is that true? So I love that you brought up shame, because I think that is a very important emotion to address in a healing environment well, it could be in very many different reasons, but definitely in my work, it becomes a very important emotion to address.
Yeah. And it's a big part of the returning process, I think, as well, just because of what that partner or toxic relationship or, unhealthy relationship can do, is just like, this is the way I define my value or my worth. So I got to keep fixing that until it's better, then I'll be worthy again. So we keep going back to try. And that's the thing. So guilt is I did bad. Shame is I am bad. And I love that. And I think the thing that kind of we need when we're in shame is what you said. It's so overpowering and over-encompassing that's like, we got to be humble to it. Like I always say to my clients, like we've got to, it brings us down to our knees, and our knees, and we kind of get so beaten by it that we've got to kind of give it this thing. It's like, I know what you can do to me. right? And if I don't have compassion, then that shame won't
Yeah.
change. I'm just going to let it fuck me up, right?
Right. 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 Oh, I love that example. And it reminds me, that is so true. And it reminds me of another example that, like, there's this concept that I call, and I don't know if I made it up. I just don't, it came to my mind, but I could have gotten it from somewhere. I don't know for sure, but
So,
it's called like monster in the closet. And so how I explain the monster in the closet is the critical thoughts, right? And the unhelpful thoughts. So bringing the monster out of the closet means that, like, when you're hearing things like, you're unworthy, you're bad, you're broken, like, that's like the monster that's like back here. They're behind you in the closet, and they're just
mm,
saying this to you, but you can't
mm,
see them, right? It's scary because it's in the
mm,
dark, right? And it's
mm,
back there, and you don't know who's it is, and it sounds terrifying. But bringing the monster out of the closet means that you take it and you pull it up out in front of you, and you ask it, can you please say that again? Say that to me again. And then what say that to me again means is that, you instead of just allowing the tape to play over and over again, you actually identify, like, what is this thought? Is it
yeah.
I am broken? Is it I am bad? Is it I'll never love again, or no one will ever love me again? And then you question that, like, is that really true? And
Mm,
what I have found with myself and with clients is that they notice that the monster kind of shrinks down to this itty bitty little thing that's just like, oh, you just flick it right off, because these thoughts thrive in the dark. In the dark they thrive. In the dark they're scary. So being aware of them and bringing them out into the forefront takes some of their, sometimes completely takes their power away. So
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
use an exercise like that with my
Yeah,
clients.
yeah. Kind of turns the light on, right? So it just becomes less scary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah. I love
Yes.
it. So I'm going to take a different swing now and just change gears a tiny bit because I
Okay.
literally could talk to you forever, and if I keep nodding, my head will fall off. But it's going good.
Yeah.
But the I think it's really important to kind of talk about the idea of the narcissist, right? Because I think that not every unhealthy, toxic relationship means that there's a narcissist within. I think there's a lot of people throwing around narcissism like it means someone being selfish or someone being, rude or disrespectful. So I know it's been thrown around a lot and actually probably disregards kind of some of the intensity of what narcissists kind of are going through, especially those
Hmm.
in recovery with narcissism, trying to get well. But I'd love to know, like, what would you or how would you define narcissistic traits or define narcissism in
Yeah.
general?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. And so when I have done like webinars and things and on the topic, I explain it as narcissism is on a spectrum, and we all can be narcissistic. Like, I think that there's a level of healthy narcissism in all of us.
Yeah.
But the what I say is that my target audience, I am focusing on high levels on the spectrum, on the high end levels of high levels of narcissism. So that means, like, the intensity is high, and the number of check boxes that they check is of symptoms is high. And so what that means is this someone who has a chronic lack of accountability, so someone who tends to blame shift, right? They don't have the capacity to take ownership over their own behaviors and things that have happened in their life. So chronically, like over and over, like most of the time, if not all the time, blame shift, so nothing is their fault, it's your fault if they act, like, how many times have people heard, well, if you, it, you make me so
Yeah.
mad that I fill in the blank, or only if you hadn't, well, you know how to push my buttons, right? So someone who chronically is blame shifting, someone who has superficial empathy, it has more cerebral empathy, and I'm just going to define that. So it like more like people who are highly narcissistic can understand that someone is upset, right? So it's like they can recognize like, hey, this is someone who is upset. But it goes deeper than that. Empathy, it has levels. So that's understanding, but then there is actually being able to feel that, oh, I can feel that somebody's hurt. And then another level to empathy is like, I guess you would also call that compassion, is that I am, not only do I feel that this person is suffering, but now I want to take action and I want to alleviate that suffering. Those levels of empathy are almost non-existent in people who are highly narcissistic. So that's why sometimes they can, especially in the beginning, they might talk a good talk and it might seem like they really understand you, but it's totally surface level. It really is. So when it comes down to actually being able to take action to alleviate that suffering, this is why they end up being very selfish. So, lack of accountability, chronic blame shifting, very surface level empathy, somebody who also, so with the blame shifting can come gaslighting. So this also means somebody who will make you question your reality on a regular basis. So even if something happened, they might say, no, it didn't. You must be hearing things. You might need to get your hearing checked, or, maybe you need to start seeing a therapist because, you're just making things up. You're crazy. That's another one they like to say, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And somebody who is, so what it really comes down to as well is that this is someone who has likely experienced trauma in their life. And that's where a lot of us can start to feel bad for them, feel sorry for them. But this is somebody who either was deeply traumatized, neglected in their childhood, or they were treated as kind of a golden child, where they, never really faced any consequences. Most of the time I see it as the first one, the trauma. It's like they've been deeply traumatized, right? And neglected. And so what ends up happening is that, unfortunately, not everybody who is deeply traumatized ends up being a narcissist, right? I mean, I have had a lot of trauma in my upbringing and I didn't become narcissistic. So it just means that that's how it manifests in some people. So for people who are highly narcissistic, it manifests in a way that where they have come to believe that who they are is bad. And so they are not able to self-regulate. So this is someone who is very reliant on external means of filling their cup up. So that means like somebody who needs a lot of validation, needs a lot of praise. And just keep this in mind is that somebody who needs external validation as their sole fuel for filling up their self is going to be very, very, almost like a ticking time bomb emotionally. They are going to be very fragile. And so they won't be able to take constructive criticism and feedback. It'll be very difficult. So, I know that's a very long-winded answer that I just gave, but in conclusion, the normal, the common, threads, the common symptoms that you would look for in someone who, that I would say this qualifies as a narcissistic person, is that they commonly don't take accountability. They commonly blame shift. They commonly will gaslight. They might have had a very rough upbringing that leads them to kind of hate themselves, not be able to self-regulate and really rely on the external means of admiration and such to be able to function in life, and means that they are very fragile people, very insecure people who it will be very difficult to give them constructive feedback.
Yeah. I love that. And mate, take as much time as you want with the long-winded answers. I think that's so important to kind of shine as much light as we can on it, because
Yeah.
it's important for people to know, and it's important for, people to kind of hear the symptoms and I guess the warning signs of where they're at for themselves, or where they're at in relationship with potential harm or abuse, or those sort of behaviors starting to build up, right? So I think this is...
Yeah, exactly. And if I just to add just a little bit more to that, is that what I just went over was sort of like almost like a moderate version of narcissism, because there's even more extreme versions, which meaning like, we've probably heard of the term narcissistic rage, right? So at a higher level of intensity, you have somebody who cannot take criticism, and their response to it is to verbally abuse you, to rage out on you, to maybe give you the silent treatment for several days on end, to make threats, to try to ruin your professional life, to go on smear campaigns where they post things in a public on social media to humiliate you or to degrade you. So it can really vary. That's why I call it a spectrum. But the first set of symptoms that I went over was kind of more like the moderate, dealing with kind of like a moderately intense narcissistic person.
Yeah, I mean, once the ball starts rolling, there's so many different symptoms and things to watch out for. Like, I'm just thinking like just the intensity of what control can look like, and how restrictive behaviors and practices can start,
yes.
and all that shit as well. So it's definitely a toxic sort of space.
Yes.
And what I think is interesting, and when you kind of link the trauma to it, and obviously I specialize in trauma, so it's a real touch point for me. But I think that the link with, whether it be narcissist or just really kind of traumatized individuals that can't emotionally regulate and have a lot of needs and have a lot of dysfunction, is the codependence that just cruise on in.
Yes.
And in a really similar way, I think, and I don't know if everyone kind of would agree with this, but the behavioral shortcomings when things aren't kind of going right in terms of self-worth for a codependent, some of the behavioral shortcomings that they will have is, this is starting to not work for me. My attachment's starting to not work. And if I'm not careful in an extreme way for codependence, my narcissism is going to come out. I'm going to start controlling. I'm going to start figuring out how much more can I sacrifice for myself in order to make this reality, different. And I do think that they're really kind of closely linked, and that's why we've got to be really careful in recovery.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And actually, it's been a while. It might have been even a year or more ago, but I did a video about this, actually, about the fact that codependence and narcissists are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
They commonly both grew up with trauma. They tend to not be able to self-regulate. So it's really difficult for both to sit with their own their own emotions, right? Negative emotions. They both tend to externalize their needs instead of meeting their own needs from within. The difference, though, is that I see is that people that manifest into highly narcissistic individuals they get their needs met by taking from other people, and people who manifest into more of codependence, they try to get their needs met by giving to other people. So it's almost like the perfect kind of like the perfect match. Like, I don't feel worthy, so I'm going to sacrifice everything for you. And the other person is like, I don't feel worthy, so I'm going to take everything from you.
Watch out for that kind of intense couple that can kind of get. I think there's a song by John Mayer which I really like the title. It's like slow dancing in a burning room, right? I think that's sort of just
Oh
like,
my gosh, I know that song. I know
you're
that
just
song. Yes.
you're in the fire. You're in the fire, and it's hot and heated, but doesn't mean it's good.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And one thing that I remember very clearly about my past abusive relationship was that when my mood depended on his mood, and his mood was very unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I kind of learned to, like, I was always on alert, and I was always kind of looking out for, okay, who am I getting today?
Mm.
What version am I getting today? And then whatever version showed up, then that was kind of like, if it was a good mood, then it was kind of like, I was like, oh, okay. But if it wasn't, then I was on edge. I was like trying to see, like, okay, how can I, sometimes it was about control. Like, how can I get ahead of the disaster that I know is coming? Because, the cycle of abuse follows the same thing over and over again. Like, the incidents of abuse keep happening. And then, but before they happen, sometimes there's a buildup of tension, meaning that, like, I can see the signs that something's going on, and I know the explosion is coming. I just don't know when. So as a codependent in an abusive relationship, now I am, I feel terrible when he's not okay.
Yeah.
And I can legitimize why that is, because there's chaos around the corner, and I know there is. But instead of leaving, it's the thing that is, instead of leaving, I stayed for a very long time and tried to, made it my job to fix,
Mm-hmm.
to like go around and put out fires,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of recognizing that this is so unhealthy, right? So I became very controlling in my own. It's weird. It's a weird kind of control with codependency, honestly, because it's like controlling with caregiving, controlling with doing tasks. It's controlling with emotional labor that you're giving,
Yeah.
but it is a form of control, and some people
100%.
do not like hearing that.
That's me. Oh, that was me. I
Yeah,
got to be really
yeah,
careful though, because it can spill out sideways still, and I really appreciate that. And then in the extremeness of it, it's I wouldn't only like meet their mood, I would full on take on whatever mental health stuff is going on for them. And if you're depressed, I'm depressed. If you're anxious, I'm
yeah.
anxious, and it starts
Yes, yes,
crippling.
yes,
So I
yes.
got two questions. They're going to take
Totally.
different amounts of time, Tully, but just so
Okay.
my ADHD brain can get it out before going on too many
Yeah.
tangents, is how do you leave, and then how do you re-engage after some time back in the relationship? Two big
Okay,
questions.
so the question
Let's
is,
start
how
with
do
the
you
first
leave?
one.
How do you leave? Yeah. Okay, so we'll go with the first one then.
Let's do it.
So how do you leave? So this is a huge question, but
Yeah,
the
good
most
luck.
general answer that I can give, yeah, right. The most general answer that I can give that will apply to everybody is that, so again, my audience and the people that I help are in relationships that are abusive. And that means doesn't necessarily mean the person is hitting them, but it means that they are in a cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, my advice is to always have a plan. If you are going to leave, you need to have a plan. Why? Because the most dangerous time for victims of abuse is when they leave. So if you have important paperwork, if you have children, make sure you get their important paperwork, know where the birth certificates are, know where the immunization records are, know where all the important papers that you need to have once you do leave, so that you can access them. easily, so that you're not just running out of the house with nothing, right?
Yeah.
And find safe people that you can talk to about the situation, because you're going to need community support. And I understand that sometimes in these situations, abusers tend to isolate us from the people that care about us, and they do this systematically. They do it for a reason, because it enables them to have more control. So if you are a person who is now isolated, where it means you don't have friends and you're not talking to your family and you don't feel like you can go to them, then utilize a local domestic violence shelter or social services. Get in touch with them just to ask questions, gather information, because it's going to be really overwhelming to even contemplate leaving when you don't know what your options are. So hopefully you do have friends and family, some people that you can trust and tell that, I am in an abusive situation and I am ready to leave, and I need your support. Right. And so support might mean emotional support. Support might mean I need you on standby when I have I totally recommend having people on standby and let them know when you plan on notifying the person that you're leaving, if you are going to have a conversation. Having a plan ensures that you can make your exit in the safest way possible. If you have children, you might need to consult social services. Or a lawyer, just to make sure that you understand what legalities are involved with, just taking your children. So, but all in all, that is the most important part, is if you plan to leave, have a plan. How are you going to leave? Who else is going to know that you're leaving? Where are you going to go? What services are available to you if you need them? How are you going to anticipate dealing with any kind of child custody issues if they come up? So having a plan in place.
Love that.
I think that's the most important thing, and that's the most general answer that I can give. How to stay out is what I do, really. That's kind of more my thing, and about healing. But if you want to leave, the most important place to start is to plan it out.
Okay. We're just going to have to roll with that into that next question, because I think that's super important and really, really good information to know when and how do we plan and who do we get around our team to kind of make sure they're all there. But yeah, how the hell do you stay out, Tully? That's a big one.
Yeah. So I think that I'm not sure if it's something we already touched on, but even if it is, I'll say it again. But the way to stay out is to stay in reality. And that means that, every time you find yourself kind of fantasizing about what the relationship could be, or what you wished it could have been, or, fantasizing about maybe if you said this or that a little differently, is to really get into the habit of bringing yourself back down to reality and reminding yourself that, no, this was abuse. And because I know what abuse is, I know that abuse, there's a cycle that it goes in, and the cycle doesn't end, but actually the longer I stay, it gets worse with time. And so even if I had stayed, it was never going to get better. So first is to continue to, make sure that you're educated on abuse. I'm not saying to go down a rabbit hole and try to diagnose this person with a personality disorder, being like an armchair psychiatrist. That's not necessarily helpful, but to just educate yourself on what abuse is and how it works and why it can be so hard to leave. It helps you understand that the fact you feel so drawn to this person isn't necessarily because they are the one for you, but it is because it is the nature of the cycle of abuse. it keeps you
Mhm.
hooked, right? So when you're
Mm.
aware, then you can know like, oh, it's okay for me to miss this person because we shared a lot of time together, and I cared about them. I can miss them and also know that they're not a part of my life and not going to be a part of my life anymore.
Yeah.
Another way to stay out is to get to know your core values. That is really
Yeah.
where me and my clients, we start at the foundation is what are your core values? What means the most to you in this world? And then getting in alignment with those values by actually doing things,
Mhm.
following that up with action. If one of your core values is that you need trustworthiness, then that means that you need to have people in your circle who are worthy of trust, and you need to be able to trust yourself. So,
Mm.
being in an
Mm.
abusive relationship throws you out of that value completely. So, because you can't trust your partner and you don't trust yourself, you're not listening to your intuition. So, getting to know yourself again, and being able to trust, to build that self trust that you can actually make decisions that are in your best interest. And then you'll
Mhm.
notice that as time goes on and you start living in alignment with your values, that your whole life is changing. That now you actually feel like you're empowered to be able to
Mm.
create the kind of life that you want, that you actually can live the kind of life that you want without this person controlling what you're
Mm.
doing. So
Mhm.
that would be the short version of explaining how to stay out.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. And that, you're hitting all the right notes for me when you say that stuff. You just got to work on you and then find that, well, because you lose you, right? And that's what you're trying to refine and get back to that
Yes.
value and that worth within you. And that's not going to be anywhere else that you see outside of you. It's got to come back down to you and finding that your value is not based on anything else and you're worthy just for freaking breathing and being.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, I love that you just said that right now, because that just reminds me of something I wanted to touch on is that, you know, in an abusive relationship, you're not even getting the basics. That's what I tell my clients is you are not even getting the basic shit, which is kindness, respect,
Mm.
showing up for you in
Yeah.
times of need, just those, you're not getting the most basic stuff. And so, being able to build yourself back up again to know that, like, wow, like I am worthy of the basics. This person has kind of warped my mind to believe that I'm
Mm.
asking for too much, but when actually you weren't even getting the basics, and you're
Mhm.
actually worth so much more than the basics, but at least at minimum the basics. Some of my
Mm.
clients are surprised, to put it in that frame of mind, like, wow, yeah, you're right. Like I wasn't even getting the basics.
Yeah. And it's a fundamental survival need is to have attachment. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Even in disrupted ones, we're going to want to go back and try and get it. And it's when we leave it, even how dangerous or how intense or abusive it was, we're still rupturing an attachment, and that rocks the shit out of us. And I think that for a lot
Yes.
of people, they've never seen healthy. So their blueprint, like you
Right.
kind of said with your past and mine as well, is that this healthiness or doing anything that where others can be nice to us as codependents. So it's like we don't know what that's like. It scares the shit out of us. So some people just don't know what healthy
Yeah.
looks like. And I think that's a really important part that needs its time to work on is what does
Yes.
healthy mean for me?
Yes,
What are my
absolutely.
values? Like you said, how do I align? So
Right.
what I forget what I asked. It I knew this would happen. The
How
process
to
of
stay
then
out.
no re-entering relationship after some
Oh,
of that.
okay. Got it. Oh yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. So my view on that, so first of all, I would just like to say that I am a sex positive person, and if I had a client come to me and said, I am just, like I'm having like tons of casual sex and I feel amazing. If they're telling me that like post an abusive relationship if they came to me and they're just like, I'm having the time of my life. I'm just meeting people at bars and going home with them, and it's fucking amazing. But I never hear that. Not one person tells me that they are feeling fulfilled by trying to just, have casual experiences with people, Not one time have I ever heard that. And so my view on re-entering the dating scene is, getting to the point, be okay being by yourself for a little while. It really is a transformational experience. And I'm not talking about like, don't hang out with your friends or go anywhere. I'm just talking about like, maybe just don't date for a while, especially if you grew up having to, because a lot of times when we get into these relationships, it's not just that relationship that's traumatic, but we have these deeper wounds that are also amplified in the process that we haven't yet dealt with. So, we're not just dealing with an abuse. Yeah, it's a lot. So, maybe this is a person who has never really thought about what they wanted, and you just want to go out there and date and you don't even know who you are. Come on now. So, so my take on those people who have escaped, have left an abusive, toxic relationship is that I want them to, before they start dating again, I recommend that they have a consistency in their ability to trust themselves, that they are able to trust their intuition about things and make decisions from that place instead of focusing on being chosen, because pick me energy is just going to get you another asshole.
True. That's
the truth of the matter. So
preach, right?
Can you trust yourself? You're in, I'm taking you to church.
I love it.
Yeah. So, being able to trust yourself and you go on this journey of choosing you, it's not about going out there and seeking for someone to choose you. It's about you choosing someone who displays the characteristics of a healthy partner. But at the same time, we have to remember, and this is also something that happens with my clients, is that if you don't do the work, how can you expect a healthy person to want a relationship with you? I mean, like, healthy people also want healthy people as partners. So I have noticed that, some of the people that I have conversations with, and even with my clients, it comes to like, well, they just want to wait for that person to just kind of like show up and be who they need them to be. Right. Like if they just know what the healthy characteristics are, they're just going to wait for that person to just show up. Yeah. It just doesn't work that way. You have to be able to embody the qualities that you really, that are like what are your non-negotiables? Ooh. And then ask yourself, do I embody any of those? Right? Because if you want someone, like I had a client tell me that he wants a partner who is uncompromising with her values.
All right.
But he is totally compromising on his, right? So how is he going to be able to create and build a life with somebody who doesn't compromise on her values when he isn't showing up as that person, right? So, so it's like you're getting to know what a healthy partner is, but you also have to know that healthy people want healthy people as partners. So you have to do some amount of the work before you go out there and start dating. Now, I am not saying that you have to be 100% healed before you start dating, because I don't even know if 100% healed is even a thing, honestly. Yeah. I'm just saying show some consistency in being able to trust yourself. Show that you know what your values are and you can abide by them, so that you can be able to recognize a healthy partner when you see it. You know, does that person fit in with your value system? If you don't even know what your value system is, then what are you doing? Right? And getting
Yeah.
under someone new is not going to help you get over an abusive relationship. It's just not, you know. But again, I am a sex positive person, and if you are a confident, fulfilled individual who wants to go out and have a bunch of sex, I say go for it. But that is not what I see with my clients. It does not tend to help them.
Yeah. Mate, I literally had to take off my jacket because everything you're saying was just pumping me up. It's just
was on fire.
yeah. I mean, it's just like everything is just so, simplified, authentic, and just like coming back to that, like we need to find our own power, we need to find our own empowerment to kind of get where we need to be. And yeah, you got to do the work if you want to show up. Hurt people, and healthy people want to be with healthy people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can sometimes hurt people's feelings because they're just like, what do you mean? Are you saying I'm an unhealthy person? It's like, I'm not. So I had a therapist one time after one of the incidents of my ex. He, something that he would do when I would leave is threaten my life. Okay. So that's like very high level narcissistic stuff, if we're going back to those narcissistic symptoms. Okay. So I had a therapist one time that I got in touch with tell me that I was just as sick as him. And it was so deflating for me, and it was so off-putting. And it's like, in retrospect, I kind of understand what she was trying to say to me. She was trying to say to me a little bit about what we were just talking about, right? But to compare me to an abuser, to someone who, to someone who threatened my life, my family's life, who humiliated me on social media, did these terrible things, right? To compare me to a person like that and put me on level of sickness was not helpful for me as a survivor. And so, what I advocate for, and really what I'm saying here, is that we, as somebody who was a victim in a toxic relationship, there are certain habits that are just not serving you. They may have served you when you were in survival mode, but they are no longer serving you, and you never deserved the abuse. Not ever, not even for a second.
Yeah.
And so really, it's just the reminder that the key to your healing is you, that it's always been you, and that you're enough, and that you can create the kind of life that you want. So I really wanted to make that clear, because I think that in some therapeutic environments, there is still some unfortunate victim blaming that doesn't need to be there, that should not be there.
Yeah. And I think it's the fine line, right? Like there's a difference between the role self and the shit that we've kind of been brought up with and defined by, and that's a really easy thing to stop. And then there's the true self, and we're looking more at like, I was in the role, and that role doesn't serve me, and it's destructive, and I very much lost the true part of me because of like abuse that sucks the life out, isolates us, all those things. So that recovery is about redefining your true, allowing that to kind of show up rather than the role self that we can jump back into, and that's the work.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was just beautiful what you just said, because that is exactly, yes, roles, and it's not just a role that we play in an abusive relationship, but let's think about people pleasing and codependency. We play so many roles within our families and maybe with our friendships, the fixer role, the savior role, the listener role, the emotional support role, so we can really get lost in these different roles. And being able to be curious, to get to the point where we are curious and willing to take action and find out, like, who am I underneath these roles? Who am I without the role? You know? Yeah.
We could talk all day.
Forever. Oh my God, forever. I'm so sad that you live on the other side of the planet. Like, I just want to be like, you know what? Let's go grab a bite and like continue this conversation. It's wonderful.
It's so good. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm going to stop commenting. Otherwise we'll just keep going and going and going. But, I just want to say this has been unreal. And, you know, I had an expectation that we were going to kind of just kick off and just go for it. And, you know, we work in a very similar space, self-worth, codependency, and healthy relationships, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just really grateful that we were able to talk, and hopefully everyone makes it all the way through, because there was literally gems all through. So thank you so much, Tully, for coming down.
You are so welcome. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've had a great time, and you made it really easy to just have a natural conversation, and I hope it was helpful for your audience.
Yeah, well, it was helpful for me. I'm sure it'll be helpful for lots. So I appreciate your time.
If you want to find out more about how therapy can help you kick some goals, go check out findreasontherapy.com.au or the Find Reason Therapy Instagram page.